Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. You're watching Discussion Today with me, Tina Jha. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday spoke about his government's reforms spanning from manufacturing to taxation to labour, saying they have changed the world perception about the country from why India to why not India. Speaking at Industry Association ASSOCHAM's Foundation Week event, the Prime Minister said agricultural reforms brought in by his government 6 months ago have started benefiting the farmers. In fact, he also cited scrapping of 1,500 old and obsolete laws and framing new ones in tune with the changing investment order as an example of his government's outlook. The Prime Minister said even during the pandemic, when the world is troubled for investment, record FDI and PFI have come to India as the world trusts the Indian economy now. In line with this increased confidence of the world, he also gave a call for the industry to increase the domestic investment drastically. Also lamenting the poor investment in research and development by the Indian industry, the Prime Minister called for increase in investments in R&D, especially in sectors like agriculture, defence, space, energy, construction, pharma and the transport sector. And he further said that in every sector, all the companies should earmark a certain amount for R&D. On Discussion Today, we will analyse the significant points made by Prime Minister Modi on the economic reforms brought in by his government. And we'll also discuss with experts the state of the country's economic recovery from the setback of COVID-19. Joining us on the program today are Mr. Kannan Kumar, he's Public Policy Consultant, Niti Aayog, and Mr. Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, Consulting Editor, The Business Standard. Welcome, gentlemen, on this edition of Discussion Today. Mr. Bhattacharjee, let me begin the program with you. So addressing the ASSOCHAM event, the Prime Minister said that there has never been so much positivity about India before. And, you know, in this aspect, he went on to say that now the world trusts Indian economy so much that the mindset has changed from why India to why not India. If you could highlight some of the key reforms that have been brought in by the government in the past few years.
Yeah, that's interesting, Tina, because it's something that India was always struggling to, making a point that it is a good place to come rather than being the desired place to come. The point of choice rather than point of among several choices. So that definitely is a very strong tone of confidence.
Yes.
And obviously, two things happen to make that confident tone possible. One is, first of all, the series of changes that the government has been taking. The second is, of course, the response which seems to be coming as a result of that. So if we break them down, first of all, as you said, which are the reforms? Well, I would still say that the biggest reform that we have done is the couple of ones which we did before the COVID problem came along, which was that in the change in the bankruptcy law and the change in the GST. Both of them have been very significant, and it is now that the impact of those in terms of a simplified tax structure, which is getting to be noticed by industry. Industry is getting comfortable. The third part of it is, and this is a very often overlooked part, which is the digital movement. A lot of tax-related issues, a lot of intersection between government and the industrial sector is becoming digital. Now, how is that? For instance, you might say a simple thing like a FASTag, which is used on toll plazas now, has become so commonplace, but it wasn't commonplace even a year ago. But it makes for such a major change in logistics. COVID pandemic has shown us how important logistics is to ensure the goods reach people when people are not able to move. And in that context, reforms like these have been so significant. We talk about agricultural reforms, we talk of other reforms, but these sort of reforms have actually provided a sort of framework to create a situation where industry finds it easy to do business. And I think, and along with that, the new latest one in that context is the one on faceless income tax assessment, which actually is very important because it doesn't tie up industry, any unit, to a particular assessing officer. It says that you can be anywhere. Your files, you don't need to really to be tied to a particular area, particular sector, particular officer to understand where your assessment is happening. These make for a lot of changes. Along with that, one major thing that has been coming along is, I would say, labor reforms. This is just something which the government has flagged this year itself. The bills have been passed into laws. So we now have the labor laws, the changed labor laws, and they will start showing their impact soon because we have not, over several decades, not been able to use our labor effectively, create employment effectively, because we didn't know how to use our labor. And without using our labor, it becomes useless for us to even think that we'll be competing with the world. So, for instance, the production linked incentives, which the government has started out for 13 sectors, a critical part of those sectors reform is that they will invest in labor intensive processes. It's a very significant thing because we are trying to capture the low value add things and then go on to the higher value add. But in all of those, using our technical skills, used our bank of labor is so very significant that I would say that these sectors by itself, by together, they become an integrated, what I might call assurance for companies, for units to start and come and do business, which is what is getting gradually also reflected in changes that is happening in sectors like defense, in energy, in construction. Lots of sectors, lots of companies are now finding space to start doing additional investment.
Yes.
And that these actually call for, enthusiasm that yes, the entire understanding of how to work on industrial belt and how to create an industrial platform is taking shape in India.
So, Mr. Kumar, multiple reforms rightly put forth by Mr. Bhattacharjee, which have sort of buoyed the world's confidence in the Indian economy. And that's why there's been record FDI, record PFI, even during the pandemic, at a time when the world has been troubled for investment. So in line with this increased confidence of the world, what more now needs to be done to increase domestic investment drastically? Something that has been, asserted by the Prime Minister as well at the SHM event, and that will be in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan as well.
That's a good question. So as the previous speaker spoke, he mentioned the PLI scheme, the production linked incentive scheme. So the context I would like to set is, when we started off, the savings and investment rates in India was secularly coming down from 2011-12 onwards. And so the government has done reforms in two aspects. One was regulatory, as the previous speaker spoke about the labor reforms, the FDI reforms, etc., which is one aspect. But to investment to kick up, you need strong incentives. So the production linked incentive, which came last month, is a very good starting point. So there are 10 key sectors wherein the government has earmarked a total of around $26 billion. So they had tried this for the medical devices, pharma, and the electronics sector, and it has been a success. So we piloted it in 3 sectors, and we've seen a lot of interest coming for mobile phones. So a lot of foreign players like Winstron, Foxtron, Samsung, they've all shown a lot of interest. Similarly, your Indian manufacturers and Indian component manufacturers have also agreed to put in a lot of investments. So once we've seen a success, we've expanded it to other sectors as well. So we are giving it to labor-intensive sectors like food processing and textiles. We are also giving it to sectors like advanced battery cells, solar photovoltaic cells, automobiles, etc., etc. So we are covering the entire gamut. Sectors where we have future growth, certain sectors which are labor intensive, and certain sectors where we can enter into the global value chains because we already have some sort of a presence. Automobiles is a prime example of that. So this incentive scheme is in the process of getting implemented. Okay. And in my opinion, if the implementation is done properly, this will actually reverse the downward trend in terms of investment that we are seeing. And this will also have multiple multiplier in terms of consumption.
Mr. Bhattacharjee, when we talk about investment in R&D, one area that was pointed out by the Prime Minister today, investment in R&D and for companies to sort of earmark a certain amount for this particular sector? How good will that idea be? And also help us understand why India Inc. is, what is holding them back from investing in R&D in our country? In countries like America, more than 70% of investment in research and development is from the private sector. Why can that not be replicated in our country?
That's a point, and this is something which it's rather sad that the Prime Minister has to actually push this. And let's look at it in terms of data. Out of the total R&D that happens in India, less than 10% happens from the private sector. This is a most unfortunate development. And as it is, even if you take the total R&D budget in India, that is also in terms of the GDP, not more than 4% or 5% at most. That's about the max, taking everything. This is really very low for a country which has got aspirations of actually breaking into cutting-edge technology. Prime Minister Modi talked about the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and he's right. That is where we are heading. And whether we want it or not, we shall be in the middle of it. In fact, we are already in the middle of it. Look at the way companies are now shifting their operations from back end to front end. Everything is now digital, and cloud computing, everything else you can think of, AI and machine learning, and then going on to AI, artificial intelligence. These are like just immediate things now. They're not even some things which are going to be in future. We have seen that the rapid pace in which vaccines came into this world. Vaccines used to take about 10, 15, 20 years or even more for vaccines to come. Look at the way the world moved in terms of technology to be able to come from conceptualization to implementation, that the vaccines are today now being offered to so many millions of people. This is the pace at which investments are happening in R&D. And we therefore need our companies to actually push the packet on R&D. Indian companies, again, as I said, in the non-public sector, in the private sector, have been often very happy to basically go out shopping in the world, pick up technology, and then come back to sort of replicate here in India. It won't do. You have to be now the industry. You have to be the R&D leader to be able to create technology which actually creates incentives for others to come and shop from here. So there are some things happening. It's when we look at that, for instance, in the case of energy, for instance, there is a lot of expectation now that in the case of hydrogen technology, for instance, in energy, carbon capture and sequestration, India will be able to do something. But these are some things which are now need to be happening in many other sectors. The fact that we can replicate technology is well known. For instance, in the case of vaccines, again, India is the world's production house for vaccines. All the vaccines, whether those are used in India or whether they will be used abroad, will be made in India. That's excellent. But what we now need, and which is why he's talking about the fact that compared to America, where 70% of the investment in R&D is from the private sector, Indian industry needs to plow back its investment, its profits into research and development.
And especially when our goal is not just to become self-reliant, but how soon we achieve that goal is important. Mr. Kumar, in that context, what can be done for the private sector to be encouraged to invest heavily in R&D?
So, the context that I would like to give here is we have to look at the trade basket of India. So the problem with our trade basket is if 70% of our exports is going into the global market, where the market share is just 30%. That is, we are going into areas which is predominantly low value added, textiles, leathers, etc. But 70% of the global trade as a whole happens in high technology, electronic products, mobile phones, automobiles, etc., where our presence is very less. So in order to encourage R&D, the Prime Minister has, in his speech itself, noted down the sectors that are very important. And these sectors are the major chunk of the global trade. And unfortunately, our presence in these sectors is very less. Even though we have like a huge auto sector in India, our percentage in global trade of auto is just 1 to 1.5 percentage. And to encourage R&D, we need a two-tier kind of an approach. One is to bring the foreign bigwigs into India and giving a lot of R&D support and incentives for R&D will be a huge, will bring in the necessary results, because countries like South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, they give their automobile sectors the expenditure, the R&D expenditure, and the even the salary component. Most of it is given is given a weighted or a higher weighted coverage in terms of expenditure that can reduce their profit and loss. So a similar system can be looked at for India in certain sectors, which will bring in foreign companies to move their R&D units to India and also do R&D research for the entire globe.
Okay. Okay, let's take the discussion forward and talk about the economic recovery. Mr. Bhattacharjee, if we look at the GDP numbers, they indicate that India's economic recovery is faster than what was expected. Several economic indicators have in fact also been encouraging. How hopeful are you of the country's economic growth likely to reach the pre-COVID-19 levels by the end of the 2021 financial year?
The big thing that we need to be really cautious about is that avoiding another wave of infection. That is something that underlays every possible discussion.
Yes.
And we are extremely happy that obviously that the numbers are looking extremely encouraging. But again, as has been said repeatedly by our medical experts, there's absolutely no room for complacence. This is a disease which can come back with a vengeance, as countries are finding out, and we need to be absolutely careful. I mean, there's no point saying that that there's something that won't happen to us. So that's the first thing. Assuming that we are able to handle that, then we can definitely say that India, as you started out, Tina, by pointing out, is in a sweet spot because of the fact that we have got several things that have been done properly. One is, first of all, the fact that the thing that handles is that the government is showing the intention, and not just the intention, a very strong intention to move ahead with the reforms. That's very important, because that was something that has often been accused, the Indian government has been accused of not being pushed, of not being, really being there on reforms. Reforms in the factor market of land, labor, and agriculture, especially labor and agriculture today, despite the difficulties, that the fact that the government is willing to, really push the pedal is very significant. The second part of it is that if you look at what has happened in terms of the companies, the balance sheet, what's happened is that the consumption in the economy is sort of coming back, but also there's some amount of investment that seems to be coming back in terms of the capacity that is being used right now. It's too early to say that fresh capacity is being built, because those numbers are yet, it's too early we are just in the third quarter, and that'll take time. But for instance, you saw the road minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, saying that he intends to spend the 10,000 crore allocated to his ministry, the additional 10,000 crore that allocated to his ministry within March on terms of road construction. Those are numbers which are very solid, and which allow for confidence that the pace of activity in the economy would pick up. Similarly, you can see that there is a marked rise in the demand for cement, the demand for steel. These are really picking up. So when there's a picking up, what's happening is that means that and in fact that is also shown in our recent IIP, the Index of Industrial Production Products, in the Index of Industrial Production numbers. You can see that the intermediate goods, why they have not risen, but the capital goods sector, which was down in the dumps for several quarters, several months, that has actually recorded a positive growth.
Okay.
And
Mr. Kumar,
that is
so,
something
as he says, there are some sectors which have picked up some indicators where the growth has been encouraging, but which are the sectors which would require hand-holding, further incentives in order to revive growth?
So the consumption side of the economy is showing some growth, but we will have to wait and watch whether this growth is because of suppressed demand, which was there during the times of COVID, or is this genuine demand?
Okay.
So it is going to take a few months to figure this out. And then the second, once that's figured out, the second aspect that has to be covered is the labor-centric sectors and the export component. So as I said already, India's exports predominantly comes from sectors which are very labor-intensive and low value. But these are very significant sectors in terms of growth and in terms of employment for the entire country. So sectors like textiles, leather, footwear, and automobiles, these are sectors which will need a certain amount of, there is already credit flow that has been given to them, but the usage till now has not been very encouraging. So we will have to relook at it and kind of encourage them to go big on it. Similarly, in terms of growth of loans, this is also something which is stagnant or it's slightly coming down. So even though there has been a lot of push from to give asking the banks to give more loans, it's the demand component which is kind of sticky right now. So even though the RBI has taken a very supportive stand for growth, we will have to look at these 2-3 factors: how to use interest rate, how to use the banking sector to give more credit, and how to handhold or give some sort of support to our traditional sectors of strength, which will kind of have a larger multiplier in the near future.
Okay. Mr. Bhattacharjee, since we are just weeks away from the union budget and we heard the finance minister say that this budget is going to be like never before, of course, what can we expect in the union budget which comes amid the biggest health crisis that we are facing?
Well, one of the first things would be that, or rather the most important thing would be that how much does the government create the room for infrastructure investment? That is very important, because we know that the fiscal deficit, even the revenue deficit, will be extremely bad. But when we have got a credit growth which has decelerated to 5.8% and 5.7% in the last 2 fortnights, you can see that demand growth can only come from the industrial sector when there is large ticket investments happening, because that will actually move the needle in terms of credit. Mr. Kumar was talking about needing to really push the demand there, and that I think is very important. That banks have been very selective with their credit portfolios, but bank credit right now has been going only to the sectors which have been backstopped by the government, which largely include the MSME sectors. And that is necessary. But MSME sector growth will not really push the economy massively unless we have the big ticket movement, which is that of infrastructure. So compared to anything else, knowing that the government will not have the finances available to really give out any major handouts, the big number to look at is how significantly is the government pushing the investment, public sector investment, that's what I mean, in infrastructure sectors. And once that is done, and with a short time frame and methods to show that it's going to happen. In fact, as you saw today, the Prime Minister also talked about the investment avenues that have been opened up, the rates and the InvITs, basically to ensure that there's more FDI coming into that sort of an investment. We would need to really be, that's something which will be seen as very positive by the industry in India, by the earning sector in India, by people who are looking at India with interest. All of them will basically be looking at that metric. And Finance Minister has also said that she's not going to be hamstrung by the fiscal deficit and recognizes the need for that sort of a stimulus.
Mr. Kumar, one final question from you. The government, of course, is also acknowledging that besides all these challenges, job creation is one area which is going to undergo massive change post-pandemic. How prepared are we on that front?
So post-pandemic, we don't know how the supply chains are going to change because the production lines which got broken during the COVID. So we saw what happened in the vaccine manufacturing. So vaccine, which usually takes like 4 or 5 years, was done in a matter of a year right now. Similarly, manufacturing, we saw because of labor, lack of movement of labor, people would have actually gone back to technology, or they would have they will have plans to have some other alternative methods to get it done. So right now, in terms of creating more jobs, investments is the key. And as Mr. Bhattacharya has pointed out, there is a need for investment in infrastructure because historically, investment in infrastructure has given the best returns in terms of multipliers for the economy. Along with it, the schemes that the government has brought in recently will also ensure that there is enough economic activity that happens in the next coming few months. And we will have to wait and watch how that translates into job creation.
Certainly. So on that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Discussion Today. Thank you to both my guests for joining us on the program and sharing your perspective on the subject with us. Pleasure having you on the program. So that's it from us on this edition of Discussion Today. Just in case you missed the television broadcast of our program, you can also watch it on YouTube, and you can also send us your feedback and suggestions about our program as well. We'll be back same time tomorrow with another subject and a different set of panelists as well. Take care, and thank you very much for your time.